Victorian London was a city of incredible contrast. It was the heart of a vast and powerful empire. It was a place of immense wealth, scientific progress, grand architecture, yet just a stone's throw from the gleaming palaces. Another world existed, the East End, a sprawling, overcrowded labyrinth of poverty and despair. Here, the grand narrative of Victorian progress fell silent. Streets were narrow and poorly lit, often shrouded in thick, soupy fog, mixed with smoke from countless coal fires and factories. Life was cheap. Survival was a daily struggle. Whitechapel was the epicenter of this hardship. A chaotic maze of slum housing known as rookeries, entire families crammed into single, squalid rooms. The air reeked of tanneries, slaughterhouses, human waste. Gin palaces on every corner offered cheap, momentary escape. Many women, with few options, sold their bodies on the streets to afford a meal or a bed. This environment was a perfect breeding ground for crime. Into this bleak landscape, a new kind of terror was about to be unleashed. The story of Jack the Ripper begins in the late summer of 1888. On August 31st, the body of a woman named Mary Ann Nichols was discovered in Bucks Row. She was one of the many unfortunates of Whitechapel, a woman forced into prostitution by poverty. However, the nature of her injuries hinted at something far more disturbing than a typical robbery or brawl. Her throat had been cut so deeply that she was nearly decapitated. Just over a week later, on September 8th, the killer struck again. This time the victim was Annie Chapman, found in the backyard of a house on Hanbury Street. But this time the killer had gone further, surgically removing her uterus and part of her bladder with a terrifying precision. It was now horrifyingly clear that this was no ordinary criminal. The terror reached its peak on the night of September 30th, an event that would become known as the Double Event. In the early hours of the morning, the body of Elizabeth Stride was found in Dutfield's yard. Less than an hour later, and only a short walk away, the body of Catherine Eddowes was discovered in Mitre Square. Her murder was the most gruesome to date. She had been disemboweled, her kidney removed, her uterus removed. This double murder sent a shockwave of panic across London and the entire country. The name Jack the Ripper had now entered the public consciousness. The police were completely baffled and under immense pressure. The murders were investigated by the Metropolitan Police's H Division, based in Whitechapel. With help from Scotland Yard detectives, including Inspector Frederick Aberley, they used every method available. Officers went door to door, interviewing thousands of people in lodging houses, in the slums. They questioned butchers, slaughtermen, and anyone with surgical knowledge. They even disguised themselves as destitute women, trying to lure the Ripper into a trap. A brave but fruitless endeavour. Public fear escalated into mass hysteria. Whitechapel's streets grew eerily quiet at night. Women feared walking alone. Vigilante groups patrolled the streets, the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee, led by George Lusk. Rumours spread like wildfire. Some said a mad doctor, others a crazed butcher, or even a supernatural demon. The press fueled the panic. The Star, front page, 1888. The Pall Mall Gazette, front page, 1888. Sensational headlines and gruesome details sold papers. The Dear Boss letter signed Jack the Ripper arrived at Central News Agency. On November 9, 1888, Mary Jane Kelly was found in her room at 13 Miller's Court. Then, as suddenly as he had appeared, the killings stopped. With the killer having vanished into thin air, the police and amateur sleuths were left with a bewildering array of potential suspects. Over the decades, this list has grown into a veritable gallery of ghouls, with theories ranging from the plausible to the utterly fantastic. One of the most prominent police suspects at the time was Montague John Druitt. He was a barrister and schoolteacher from a good family. Druitt's body was found floating in the River Thames in December of 1888, not long after the final murder. Another suspect favoured by the police was a Polish immigrant named Aaron Kosminski. He was a hairdresser in Whitechapel who suffered severe mental illness, including auditory hallucinations and paranoid fear. He was admitted to an asylum in 1891 and remained institutionalized for life. In recent years, controversial DNA from a shawl said to belong to Catherine Eddowes has been claimed to point to Kosminski, though that finding is highly disputed by many experts. Other theories pointed to men with specific medical or trade skills. Michael Ostrog, a Russian-born con man with asylum history, was another MacNaughton suspect. George Chapman, real name Surin Klasowski, was a poisoner hanged in 1903 for murdering 3 wives. Inspector Aberley strongly believed Chapman was the Ripper. The list extends into more outlandish territory, implicating the artist Walter Sickert, the author Lewis Carroll, and even Prince Albert Victor, Duke of Clarence and Avondale. Each suspect has proponents and detractors. Theories rest on circumstantial evidence, speculation, and coincidence. Without a confession or definitive proof, these figures remain just shadows in the Ripper's dark legend. The story of Jack the Ripper did not end with the murders in 1888. It has endured for well over a century, transforming from a terrifying true crime story into really a modern myth. A key reason for this lasting fascination is the simple fact that the case remains officially unsolved. The killer was never caught, never identified, and never brought to justice. This is an open-ended mystery, a puzzle with a missing piece that invites endless speculation. It allows each new generation of investigators, historians, and amateur detectives, known as Ripperologists, to sift through the evidence and propose their own theories, keeping the story alive and constantly evolving with new suspects and interpretations. The media's role, which began with the sensationalist press of the Victorian era, has been crucial to cementing the Ripper's legacy. The name Jack the Ripper itself was a media creation, a perfect chilling brand for a bogeyman. This has continued through countless books, documentaries, and films, each adding new layers to the legend. The murders also serve as a dark window into the Victorian era, exposing the deep social inequalities that the society tried so hard to hide. The victims were not wealthy or famous. They were impoverished women living on the margins of society, made vulnerable by their circumstances. The Ripper's crimes brutally highlighted the plight of the poor in the world's richest city, forcing the public to confront the grim conditions in the East End. Ultimately, Jack the Ripper remains a mystery because he is a blank slate onto which we can project our deepest fears. He was a killer who came from the shadows and returned to them, leaving behind only mutilated bodies and a handful of taunting letters. He has no face, no voice, and no known motive, making him an embodiment of nameless, random terror. He is not just a historical figure, he is a legend, a ghost who still haunts the cobblestone streets of our collective imagination, ensuring that the autumn of terror will never truly be over.